Welcome to this evening's performance of The Jeweler Shop. I'm Dr. John Hittinger. I'm the director of the Pope John Paul II Forum, and it is our pleasure to present this play. In 1978, when Karol Wojtyla was elected Pope, the whole world became his stage. But he never strayed far from the Polish theater community. A group of actors met in basements and living rooms during the time of the Nazi occupation. And they would gather together and read their favorite passages, long passages from Polish literature. And particularly, they loved Cyprian Norwid, who wrote long rhapsodies of poetry in his novels, hence was born the Rhapsodic Theater. Its founder was Mieczysław Kolarczyk. He wrote a memoir 20 years later, and in this memoir he said, "We met in the dark kitchen of our catacombs, often by candlelight when the power was turned off. These were romantic rehearsals that just deepened our Polish consciousness, our resolve to get to the shores of freedom and to be faithful to our ideal of culture." Now, young Karol Wojtyla, at 21, was one of 4 actors chosen by Kolarczyk to be part of his core ensemble. After the war, 3 of the 4 went on to professional theater, successful careers on the stage. God had other plans for Karol Wojtyla. He joined the seminary, also an underground affair to evade the Nazi occupation. But again, he stayed close to his roots with the theater. It's reported that the first baptism he performed was for one of his fellow actors who was in that core ensemble. The daughter's name was Monica, which just happens to be the name of one of the characters in the play. And it is reported that baby Monica cried so much during the ceremony that the novice priest was flustered and left in a hurry. That might be the last time Karol Wojtyla was ever flustered. Babies can do that too. He would stage mini dramas for his parishioners. He continued to attend the plays. The Rhapsodic Theater was allowed to come out from the underground and perform for a while, and he would attend plays. He wrote reviews under a pseudonym. And actually, the communist authorities twice threatened to close the Rhapsodic Theater, and Karol Wojtyla objected publicly and defended their right to exist. He did lose those battles, but he won the big one in 1989, of course, with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the liberation of Poland. But perhaps most remarkable of all is that he wrote plays as an auxiliary bishop. He became full archbishop in 1964, but he had time in 1961 to write The Jeweler Shop. He gave it a curious subtitle. The subtitle is "A Meditation on the Sacrament of Matrimony, Passing on Occasion into Drama." Now, Kolarczyk told him he was too humble. It was filled with drama. But it's no doubt it's a meditation. It's a meditation born of his own humanity, conversation with friends, and his priesthood. The drama provided by his artistic creativity. It does reflect the ideals of the Rhapsodic Theater: respect for the concrete person, freedom, and the search for community or solidarity. And that's why we've decided to stage this play. It's coming up on a 70th anniversary. It was in October of 1941 that the Rhapsodic Theater was founded. So to see the mind of Karol Wojtyla in The Jeweler Shop fulfills the mission of the John Paul II Forum, which is to promote the understanding of the thought of John Paul II. In addition to the play, next week we will have a special event, an interpretation of the play by a professor from DePaul, Peter Casarella. The name of the talk is The Weight of Love, What the Jeweler Shop Has to Teach Us. It's at 7 p.m. Thursday next week. You are all invited. It's free and open to the public. Really, the last thing I would say is I want to thank our director, Guy Schatz, who started planning this with me a year ago and has brought out really the drama, the dramatic craft of Wojtyla from this meditation. And the young actors, I've just been very impressed by their dedication, their time, their enthusiasm for this play, which brings to life love lost and love gained on the streets of Krakow or the streets of any town. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you The Jeweler Shop.
Representatives of men and women, of practically all the people of the world, individual men and women, communities and peoples who are living the present phase of their own history and who are also part of the history of humanity as a
Andrew has chosen me and asked for my hand. It happened today between 5 and 6 in the afternoon. I don't remember exactly. I had no time to look at my watch or catch a glimpse of the clock on the tower of the old town hall. At such moments, one does not check the hour. Such moments grow in one above time. But even had I remembered to look at the town hall clock, I could not have done so, for I would have had to look above Andrew's head. We were just walking on the right side of the market square when he turned around and said,
"Would you like to be my life's companion?"
That's what he said. He didn't say, "Do you want to be my wife?" but "my life's companion." What he intended to say must have been thought over. He said it looking ahead, as if afraid to read in my eyes, and at the same time as if to signify that in front of us was a road whose end could not be seen. There was, or at least could be, if I replied yes to his question. I answered yes, not at first, but after a few minutes. And yet, in the course of those few minutes, there was no need for reflection, no need to struggle between motives. The answer had almost been determined. We both knew that it reached deep into the past and advanced far into the future, that it penetrated our existence like a weaver's shuttle to catch the weft that determines a fabric's pattern. I remember Andrew did not turn his eyes to me at once, but looked ahead for quite a while, as if gazing intently at the road before us.
I went quite a long way before reaching Teresa. I did not find her at once. I do not remember if our first meeting was marked by a kind of presentiment, and I don't think I even know what love at first sight means. After a time, I realized she had come into the focus of my attention. I mean, I had to be interested in her, and at the same time, I accepted the fact that I had to. Though I could have behaved differently from the way I felt I must, I thought there would be no point. There must have been something in Teresa that suited my personality. I thought much at the time about the alter ego. Teresa was a whole world, just as distant as any other man, as any other woman. And yet there was something that allowed one to think of throwing a bridge. I let that thought run on and even develop within me. It was not an assent independent of an act of will. I simply resisted sensation and the appeal of the senses. for I knew that otherwise I would never really leave my ego and reach the other person. But that meant an effort, for my senses fed at every step on the charms of the women I met. When once or twice I tried following them, I met solitary islands. This made me think that beauty accessible to the senses can be a difficult gift or a dangerous one. I met people led by it to hurt others. And so gradually I learned to value beauty accessible to the mind. That is to say, truth. I decided then to seek a woman who would indeed be my real alter ego, so that the bridge between us would not be a shaky footbridge among water lilies and reeds. I met a few girls who absorbed my imagination and also my thoughts. But at the moments when it seemed to me I was most concerned with them, suddenly I realized Teresa was still there in my consciousness and memory, and I instinctively compared each of them with her. And yet I even wished them to push her from my consciousness. In a way, I counted on it, and I was ready to follow sensation. Strong, forceful sensation. I wanted to regard love as passion, as an emotion to surpass all. I believed in the absolute of emotion. And that is why I could not grasp the basis of that strange persistence of Teresa in me, the cause for her presence, the assurance of her place in my ego, or what creates about her that strange resonance, that feeling you ought to. So I avoided her cautiously, deliberately evaded everything that could cause even the shadow of a guess. Sometimes I even tormented her in my thoughts, while seeing in her my tormentor. It seemed to me she pursued me with her love, and that I must cut myself off decisively. Thus grew my interest in Teresa. Love grew, in a sense, from resistance. Or, love can be a collision in which two selves realize profoundly they ought to belong to each other, even though they have no convenient moods and sensations. It is one of the processes in the universe which bring a synthesis, unite what was divided, broaden and enrich what was limited and narrow.
I must admit, Andrew's proposal was something I did not expect. I really had no reason to count on it. It always seemed to me Andrew did everything to make me useless to him and to convince me that this was so. If I was not quite unprepared for his proposal, it was because I felt that somehow I was the right one for him and that I supposed I could love him. Being aware of that, I must have already loved him. But that was all. I never allowed myself to nurse a feeling that remained unanswered. Today, however, I can admit to myself that it was not easy. I recall one month particularly, and in that month, one evening, we were hiking in the mountains, a big group of people, but very close. Our friendship was especially strong. We understood one another perfectly. Andrew was then quite clearly interested in Christine, but this did nothing to spoil the pleasure of the ramble for me, for I was always hard as a tree that would rather rot than topple. If I cried for myself, it was not from disappointed love, and yet it was difficult. That evening, particularly, night fell as we were going down, and I shall never forget the small lakes that surprised us on the way, like two cisterns of unfathomable sleep. There was metal asleep, mixed with the reflection of a bright August night, and yet there was no moon. Suddenly, as we were standing and watching, I shan't forget that this as long as I live, somewhere above our heads we clearly heard a call. It was rather like a wailing, or like a groan, or even a whine maybe. Everyone held his breath. It was not clear whether it was a man calling or a late bird wailing. The call was repeated once more, and then the boys decided to call back. Through the quiet sleeping woods, through the mountain night went a signal. If it was a man, he would hear it. The first voice, however, was heard no more. Just then, when everyone had grown silent, listening, in case the call might be repeated once more, I was suddenly struck by another thought. This one also about signals. That thought returned to me today between Andrew's profile and the tower of the old town hall in our city. Today between 5 and 6 in the afternoon when Andrew asked for my hand. Then I was thinking about signals that could not connect. It was a thought about Andrew and myself, and I felt how difficult it is to live. That night was terribly hard for me, though it was a truly glorious mountain night and full of nature's secrets. Everything around seemed so very necessary, and so in harmony with the world's totality, only man was off balance and lost. Perhaps not every human being, but I know for certain that I was. So today, when Andrew asked me,
would you like to become forever my life's companion?
After 10 minutes, I answered yes. And after a while, I asked him if he believed in signals.
Teresa asked me today,
Andrew, do you believe in signals?
and when I, surprised at this question, looked, astonished, into my fiancé's eyes, my fiancé of a quarter of an hour, she told me her thoughts, those that had been revolving in her head since the evening in the mountains. How close she passed by me then. She almost hemmed me in with her imagination, and that discreet suffering, which at the time I did not want to know, but today am willing to regard as our common good. Teresa, 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 like the strange focus of my way to maturity. No longer a prism of superficial rays, but a being of true light. And I know I cannot go further. I know I shall not seek any more. I only tremble at the thought that I could so easily have lost her. For several years she had been walking by me, and I did not know it was she that was walking and maturing. I recoiled from accepting what today for me is a most magnificent gift. Several years later, I see it clearly, that roads which should have diverged have brought us closer together. Those years have been invaluable in giving us time to get our bearings on the complicated map of signs and signals. It must be so. Today, I see that my country is also her country. And after all, I dreamed of throwing a bridge. In the evenings in our old city, evenings in October begin early. Men leave their offices where new housing developments are planned. Women and girls on the way home look in shop windows. I met Teresa when she had just paused in front of a large window full of ladies' shoes. I stopped by her quietly and unexpectedly, and all of a sudden we were together on both sides of the big transparent sheet filled with glowing light. And we saw our reflections together, because behind the window display is a great immense mirror which reflects the shoe models as well as the people passing on the pavement, especially those who stop to look at themselves or at the shoes. So when we found ourselves on both sides of the great mirror, here alive and real, and there reflected, I, who knows why, maybe to complete the picture, but more likely just in answer to my heart's need, asked, "What are you thinking about, Teresa?" I asked this almost in a whisper, for this is how those in love are wont to talk.
I wasn't thinking then about signals anymore. And I wasn't really thinking about Andrew. I was looking for high-heeled shoes. There were many sports shoes, many comfortable walking shoes, but I was really straining my eyes for a high-heeled shoes. Andrew is so much taller than I that I have to add a little to my height. And so I was thinking about Andrew and about myself. I was now constantly thinking about us two. He must surely think like this too, and so must rejoice at my thought. We then began to talk about all sorts of little things connected with our wedding. I told him about the tie in which I like him most, and about the dark suit which best becomes him. Andrew listened to all this gladly, not because he wished to be flattered, but because he wanted me always to find him attractive and wanted to please me. Then we looked together in the window of a jeweler's shop, where in little boxes inlaid with velvet, jewelry was exhibited. Among them were wedding rings. We looked for a while in silence. Then Andrew took me by the hand and said,
"Let's go in, Teresa. We'll choose our rings." And yet we did not go in at once, held back by a thought which, we felt this clearly, arose at the same time in me and in her. The rings in the window appealed to us with a strange force. Now they are just artifacts of precious metal, but it will be so only until the moment when I put one of them on Teresa's finger and she puts the other on mine. From then on, they will mark our fate. They will constantly act as a reminder of the past, as a lesson to be memorized for good, and they will constantly open up the future, joining the past with the future. By the same token, they are, for all time, like two last links in a chain, to unite us invisibly. So we did not enter the shop at once. The symbols spoke. We both understood it immediately. Looking at wedding rings, we yielded to emotion without words. That was what held us up in front of the shop. We put off the moment of entry. I only felt Teresa cling more tightly to my shoulder. And that was our now. The meeting of the past with the future. Here we both are. We grow out of so many strange moments, as if from the depths of facts, ordinary and simple though they are. Here we are together. We are secretly growing into one because of these two rings. Someone spoke quite loudly behind our backs.
This is the jeweler's shop. What a strange craft to produce objects that can stimulate reflection on fate. To gild watches, for instance, which measure time and tell man of the transience of all things in their passing.
Someone ceased to speak. The woman found her way, though, to the edge of our thoughts. We went on standing in silence. Imagination worked, though. I already saw, as in a mirror, myself in a white wedding dress, kneeling with Andrew dressed in a dark suit. As we entered the church, I equaled him in height, inasmuch as there was no disproportion. This was why I had to buy those high-heeled shoes I saw today in that other window. And now, the strangest thing, and unexpected. As we were standing thus in front of the jewelers, we both remembered fragments of letters written a few years ago. I want to return, Andrew, to our August hike, to that night when we heard those strange signals. You remember there was some confusion and difference of opinion. Some felt that we ought to begin a search for wanderers who might be lost in the thick of the forest, while some, on the other hand, took the view that it had been a late bird wailing, not a man. You were among the latter. It was a memorable night, also memorable because it was then, it seems to me, Andrew, that I saw you in truth. And believe me, the contrast dormant in you almost struck me in the face. A disproportion between the wish for happiness and a man's potential is unavoidable. But you try to calculate your happiness at any price, just as you calculate everything in your planning office. You lack courage and trust. In what? In whom? In life. In your own fate. In people. In God.
So you are courageous and full of trust, and yet how many times did I see tears in your face, though your eyes remain dry? Maybe you think you courageously reach for happiness, but in fact, this is only another form of fear. Or caution, at least.
Imagination was working more and more intensely, ranging over reminiscences, over the past to the future, whose picture was ever nearer. So I see myself near Andrew, equal to him in height. We are both elegant and somehow mature. We matured through so many letters exchanged during those years. We are still standing in front of that shop, choosing our fate together. But the window has turned into a mirror of our future. It reflects its shape.
The wedding rings did not stay in the window. The jeweler looked long into our eyes. Testing for the last time the fineness of the precious metal, he spoke seriously, deep thoughts, which remain strangely in my memory.
The weight of these golden rings,
He said,
is not the weight of metal, but the proper weight of man, each of you separately and both together. Man's own weight, the proper weight of man. Can it be at once heavier and more intangible? It is the weight of constant gravity, riveted to a short flight. The flight has the shape of the spiral, an ellipse, and the shape of the heart. The proper weight of man. This rift, this tangle, this clinging, this ultimate depth, when it is so hard to unstick heart and thought. And in all this, freedom. A freedom and sometimes frenzy trapped in this tangle. And in all this, love, which springs from freedom as water springs from an oblique rift in the earth. This is man. He is not transparent, not monumental, not simple. In fact, he is poor. This is one man. And what about two people? 4, 100, 1,000,000. Multiply all this. Multiply the greatness by the weakness. And you will have the product of humanity. The product of human life.
This is what the strange jeweler was saying while taking the measure of our rings. Then he cleaned them with chamois leather and put them in the little box which had earlier been in the window. and finally he wrapped it in tissue paper. All this while he looked into our eyes as if he wished to sound our hearts. Was he right in saying all that? Were his thoughts also ours? I suppose neither of us could think about it from such a distance. Love is enthusiasm rather than pensiveness.
So we are standing reflected in the window, as if in a mirror that catches the future. Andrew takes one of the rings. I take the other. We take each other by the hand. My God, how simple this is. What can the people think invited to our wedding? What do they think when they are silent? And what will they go on thinking when they stop talking?
The occasion is most beautiful and evokes so many associations. We are only looking at what
Man lives
is.
in the shadow line, he lives also with the line of light. Light passes into shadow, shadow into light.
New people, Teresa and Andrew, 2 until now, though still not 1. 1 from now on, though still 2. She looks sad, though.
But perhaps she's just serious and moved. A diamond flashed on Andrew's shirt front, a white flower in Teresa's hair. Though it's a different
Wine also sparkles. Wine is a thing. Let it live in the other man. Teresa and Andrew. Man is love. Wine, wine. Radiate mutually into each other's lives.
Raise your glass!
How many words?
how many words and hearts.
How many words and hearts.
And we'll go on with you along the cloister. We'll go then down the avenue, a few score, a few hundred yards.
With enthusiasm.
Sincere smile.
Up to now together.
Later, vehicles will appear. Later, a road will hinder us. When you get into the car, you must stay alone.
But let us return to the
Let
stars.
us return to warmth, to feeling.
How men thirst for feelings.
How people thirst for intimacy. Teresa and Andrew.
Trees, straight, splintered trunks.
High above the
Cutting the moon distant from the eyes.
300,000 miles.
And yet they are 2. Teresa and
The moon becomes a little drum that plays in the depths of eyes and in the depths of hearts.
Love pulsating in brows, and man becomes thought and will. The will of Teresa being Andrew. The will of Andrew.
Strange necessary. And again we move away from each other because man will not endure man forever and man will not suffice.
How can it be done, Teresa, for you to stay in Andrew forever?
How can it be done, Andrew, for you to live in Teresa
For
forever?
man will not endure in man, and man will not suffice.
Body, thought passes through it, is not satisfied by the body, and love passes through it. Teresa and Andrew, seek a harbor for thought in your bodies while they last. Seek the harbor for love!
Though we were still standing in front of the shop window, it was nonetheless clear that the window had ceased to be a display in which everyone without exception could find an object for himself. It became, however, a mirror, reflecting us both, Teresa and myself. Moreover, it was not an ordinary flat mirror, but a lens absorbing its object. We were not only reflected, but absorbed. I had an impression of being seen and recognized by someone hiding inside the shop window.
One could see it our wedding day. We were both dressed in our Sunday best, and behind us there were a lot of people. They were wedding guests. The mirror absorbed my person at various moments and in different situations. First as I was standing, then kneeling by Andrew when we were exchanging the rings. I'm also convinced that our reflection has remained forever in that mirror and cannot be extracted or removed. A little while later, we concluded that we had been present in the mirror from the beginning, or at least much sooner than the moment we stopped in front of the jeweler shop.
And the jeweler, as I've already mentioned, looked at us in a peculiar way. His gaze was at once gentle and penetrating. I had a feeling he was watching us while selecting and weighing the rings. He then put them on our fingers to try them. I had the feeling he was seeking our hearts with his eyes and delving into our past. Does he encompass the future too? The expression of his eyes combined warmth with determination. The future for us remains an unknown quantity, which we now accept without anxiety. Love has overcome anxiety. The future depends on love.
The future depends on love.
At one point, my eyes once more met the gaze of the old jeweler. I felt just then that his gaze was not only sounding our hearts, but also trying to impart something to us. We found ourselves not only on the level of his gaze, but also on the level of his life. Our whole existence stood before him. His eyes were flashing signals which we were not able to receive fully just then, as once we had been unable to receive fully the signals in the mountains. And yet, they reached to our inner hearts, and somehow we followed their direction, and they covered the fabric of our whole lives.
We stood in front of the jeweler's shop for a long time, without noticing the time or the cold of the October evening. At one point, though, we were roused by these words spoken loudly by a passerby.
It is late and the shops are closed. Why is the light still on in the old jeweler shop? He too should lock up and go home.
Back over the events of recent days, I must have been in quite a state. I must have looked with bitterness. Bitterness is a taste of food and drink. It is also an inner taste. A taste of the soul when it has suffered disappointment or disillusionment. That taste permeates everything we happen to say, think, or do. It permeates even our smile. Did I really suffer disappointment and disillusionment? Could it merely be the ordinary course of things determined by the history of two people? This is precisely how Stefan attempts to explain it, since I confessed to him at once the first grievance that arose in me. Stefan listened, but I did not have the impression that he took to heart what I told him. My grievance grew because of this. He does not love me anymore, I must have thought, since he does not react to my grief. I could not reconcile myself to this, nor could I prevent a rift opening between us. Its edges stood still at first, but at any moment they could move apart, wider and wider. At any rate, I did not feel them moving closer together again. It was as if Stefan had ceased to be in me. Did I cease to be in him too? Or was it that I simply felt I now existed only in myself? At first, I felt such a stranger in myself. It was as if I had become unaccustomed to the walls of my interior. So full they had been of Stefan that without him they seemed empty. Is it not too terrible a thing to have committed the walls of my interior to a single inhabitant who could disinherit myself and somehow deprive me of my place in it? Outwardly, nothing changed. Stefan seemed to behave the same, but he could not heal the wound that had opened in my soul. It did not hurt him. He did not feel it. Maybe he did not want to. Will it heal of itself? But if it heals of itself, it will still somehow separate us. Meanwhile, Stefan was sure he did not have anything to heal. He left me with a hidden wound, thinking, no doubt, she will get over it. Besides, Stefan was confident of his rights, whereas I wanted him to win them continually. I did not want to feel like an object that cannot be lost once it has been acquired. Was there a kind of selfishness in all of this? I certainly did not do enough to justify Stefan to myself. After all, is love to be a compromise? Should it not be born continuously out of a struggle for the love of another human being? So I fought for Stefan's love. ready to retreat at any time if he did not realize the sense of the battle. In the end, however, shall I forgive? Or is the rift to become permanent? It is very hard, this borderline between selfishness and unselfishness. I was a mother. Our children went to sleep in the next room. Mark, who was the eldest, Monica, and John. There was silence in the nursery. That rift in our love, which I felt so painfully, had not yet passed into the souls of the children.
I saw that woman here for the second time. She was passing by the old jeweler's shop. The shutters were already lowered, the door padlocked. The jeweler finishes his work at 7 and then leaves. Working all day long, he may not realize just how deeply his craft penetrates a man's life. I spoke to him once about that. The shop's door was open. The jeweler was standing on the threshold, watching the passers-by, casually, it seemed. The sun was shining, so the street was full of brightness, making people blink. Men and women were putting on their dark glasses to avoid being dazzled by the blaze. Through dark spectacles, you do not see the color of eyes, which sink in the dark as if in a well. And yet, from behind such glasses, you see everything, though peculiarly tinted, without blinking. The jeweler's shop is now closed. The faces of passers-by hide in the evening dusk.
I have often walked past here. It was on my way home every day after work. On the way to work, I take shortcuts. In the past, I paid no attention to this shop. But since the rift in our love became a fact, I have often thought about gold and wedding rings, the symbols of human love and marital faith. I recall the past appeal of that symbol, when love was something that was indisputable. A melody played on all the strings of my heart. Later, the strings became gradually muted, and neither of us could do anything about it. I thought that the guilt was Stefan's, and could find no guilt in myself. Life changed into a more and more strenuous existence of two people who occupied less and less room in each other. Only the sum of duties remained, a sum total, conventional, and changing, removed further and further away from the pure taste of enthusiasm. And so little joins together. I thought then about the rings which we both, Stefan and I, wore on our fingers. One day, on the way home from work, passing by the jeweler's shop, I thought I might as well sell this ring of mine. Probably would not have noticed. I had almost ceased to exist for him. Whether he was unfaithful to me or not, I don't know. Since I took no interest in his life either, he was indifferent to me. I suppose after office hours, he went to play cards. And after drinking, he would come home quite late, without saying a word. Or with some casual remark, to which, as a rule, I responded with silence. So, this time I decided to go in. The jeweler examined the workmanship, weighed the ring for a long time in his fingers, and looked into my eyes. For a while he was reading the date of our wedding, engraved on the inside of the ring. Again, he looked into my eyes, put the ring on the scales, and said,
This ring does not weigh anything. The needle does not move from 0, and I cannot make it show even a milligram. Your husband must be alive. In which case, neither ring taken separately will weigh anything. Only both together will register. My scales have this peculiarity in which they weigh not the metal, but man's entire being and fate.
Ashamed, I took the ring back and left without a word. think, though, that he followed me with his eyes. Since that day, I have taken a different route back home. Only again today, but I found the shop closed.
The woman whom I met by the jeweler's shop was not there by chance. Of this I am absolutely certain. I think it was, however, by chance that I started a conversation with her, as a result of which she revealed her life to me. She complained in the end that the old jeweler did not want to buy the ring which she no longer needed. In the course of that conversation, I could see the whole span of human love and its precipitous edges. When one slips over such an edge, he finds it very hard to get back and wanders alone below the road he should be on. About Stefan, I learned from Anna's words as much, as if I were to be the judge and executor of his verdict. But the jeweler was not there, and no one there to confirm these words.
I was surprised in myself for having begun such a conversation with a total stranger. I told him about Stefan and myself, making use of the fact that he was listening and did not interrupt my flow of words. It was a monologue, really, prepared in great detail in my mind. Fact followed fact, charges against Stefan. I was sure of the truth of my judgments, but I also talked like a woman, about the inner crack in love, about the rift and the wound which hurts. The man listened to me with concentration. I did not know his Christian name, or even his surname, and he did not ask me mine either. And yet, at a particular moment, he said, Anna. So he did mention my name.
How very like me you are. You and Stefan, too. You are both like me. And my name is Adam.
I wanted to ask her his address. I thought of writing a few words to him one day, and then we were walking for a while down the street. I felt so well in the company of that man. I was struck by his appearance. So manly, so grave. Thought dominated, and a tinge of pain. How different he is from Stefan.
I remember I also asked that woman, why do you wish to sell your ring here? What do you wish to break with this gesture, your life? Does one not sell one's life now and again? Does one not break one's entire life with every gesture? But what of it? The thing is not to go away and wander for days, months, even years. The thing is to return and in the old place to find oneself. Life is an adventure, and at the same time it has its logic and consistency. That is why one must not leave thought and imagination on their own.
With what is thought to remain, then?
It is to remain with truth, of course.
Isn't what one feels most strongly the truth? Our conversation took an unexpected turn, so I was not sure where else it could lead. This was the fruit of my sensitivity and his intelligence. Stefan left my awareness for a while, and yet I felt then too how unable I was to forgive him for having disgraced my reflection in him. My being, which somehow must have existed. After all, I was his wife. I was delicate, no less than passionate. Is not love a matter of the senses and of a climate which unites and makes two people walk in the sphere of their feeling? This is the whole truth. Adam, however, did not fully agree with this. Love is, according to him, a synthesis of two people's existence, which converges, as it were, at a center point and makes them into one. His words not only fascinated me, but suddenly awoke a longing in me. A longing for someone perfect, for a man firm and good who would be different from Stefan. Different! And with this feeling of sudden longing, I then felt different and younger myself. I must have even started running, looking closely at the men I was passing. The first of them did not even look in my direction when I brushed past him. He walked, lost in thought. Maybe he was thinking about his business. Perhaps he was the manager of some firm, or the chief accountant of some big concern. Without even turning his head, he just said,
Sorry.
"Sorry!" I did not try to stop him. I was, however, ready to attract his attention. I don't know how it was that I then felt ready to try and make every man notice me. It may have been just a simple reflection of that longing, but I was convinced that no one would take that right from me.
This is just what compels me to think about human love. There is no other matter embedded more strongly in the surface of human life, and no matter more unknown and more mysterious. The divergence between what lies on the surface and the mystery of love constitutes precisely the source of the drama. It is one of the greatest dramas of human existence. The surface of love has its current, swift, flickering, changeable, a kaleidoscope of waves and situations full of attraction. This current is sometimes so stunning that it carries people away, women and men. They are carried away by the thought that they have absorbed the whole secret of love, but yet they have not yet even touched it. They are happy for a while, thinking that they have reached the limits of existence and wrested all its secrets from it so that nothing remains. That's how it is. On the other side of that rapture, nothing remains. There is nothing left behind it. But there can't be nothing. There can't. Listen to me, there can't. Man is a continuum, a totality and a continuity, so it cannot be that nothing remains.
The second passerby I met reacted differently. When I looked him in the face, he noticed the look and stopped. He returned the look, walked 2 steps toward me and said,
I must have seen you somewhere before.
I must have seen you somewhere before. I was almost ready to cling to his arm. It was such a warm evening night, and so many lights filtered through the rusting October leaves. One could not see the rusted night, of course. I longed so much for a man's arm and for a walk along the avenue of whistling chestnut trees. He went on to say,
How about stepping into that club? A little light music will do you good.
How about stepping into that club? A little light music would do you good. And then he did not reply, and I seemed to take fright at that then. He must have had a wife of whom he couldn't say anything just then. Suddenly I realized what the expression "a casual woman" could mean, and something made me not cling to his arm. He was not too insistent, though, and I understood even more clearly what the expression "a casual woman" could mean. I don't know how many steps I took or in what direction. I must have walked from the avenue surrounding the old part of town toward that church, in whose recesses stand the statue of the saints. In a niche at the back, I remember, is a crucifix, in front of which a lamp burns at night. I seemed to see its light already, dimmed by the multicolored glass of the lantern. I kept walking, however, still thinking about the same thing, coming forward, as it were, toward every passing man. One passed by so fast and so close that he caught the end of his briefcase in the rib of my umbrella hanging from my right arm. Another took his hat off, looked intently at my face, and quickly put his hat back on again. I heard him mumble something like,
No, I don't know her.
"No, I don't know her." Now, I'm on the edge of the pavement, on the curb. I am walking along the curb as I used to when I was a little girl. I could then run on the curb along the street and my foot never slipped off into the road. This was a favorite game with my friends. We used to boast, "I ran all along Cool Street and Cross Street and fell off only once. I never fell off. You see this better." Now, I am walking on the curb. I am not running. My eyes are dry, but I know they are shiny. There's a car, an expensive one. The window is partly lowered. A man at the wheel. I stopped.
Love is not an adventure. It has the taste of the whole man. It has his weight and the weight of his whole fate. It cannot be a single moment. Man's eternity passes through it. That is why it is to be found in the dimensions of God, because only He is eternity. Man looking out into time, to forget, to be for a moment only now, and cut oneself off from eternity, to have everything one moment and lose everything immediately after. Ah, the curse of that next moment and all the moments that follow. Moments through which you will look for the way back to the moment that has passed. To have it once more, and through it, everything.
I stopped and fixed my eyes on the car, the windows, the man. I remember how Stefan used to say, "One day, darling, I'll buy a car and we'll drive into the unknown. We beautiful, elegant people." The man looked. I approached. He lowered the window even more. He had a low, warm voice when he said,
Won't you join me?
"Won't you join me?" In a moment, he will start the engine. We shall move off. We'll drive into the unknown. A man's hands at the wheel. One could lean slightly against his arm as he unfolds the ribbon of the road. Then, the lights from above! I shall be somebody again! He repeated the words once more. Won't you join me? I want to. I think I want to very much. I think I had already put my hand on the door handle. I only had to press it. Suddenly, I felt a man's hand on mine. I looked up. Adam was standing above me. I saw his face, which was tired. It betrayed emotion. Adam looked me straight in the eyes. He did not say anything. His hand was just lying on mine. And then he said,
No.
No! I felt the car moving past us. In a moment it was gone. Adam let go of my hand. I must have said, "It's strange that you should come back here. I thought you disappeared for good. Where were you all this time?"
I came back to show you the street. It is strange. Not because it is full of shops, neon lights, and buildings, but because of the people. To you, it seems that they are asleep in those recesses, but in reality, they too are walking down the street. They are walking in their sleep. They are walking in a lethargy. They have a dormant space in them. You now feel that space in you because you too were falling asleep. I have come to wake you. I think I am in time.
Why did you wake me? Why?
You cannot live without love. I saw from a distance how you tried to rouse interest. I could almost hear your soul. You were calling with despair for a love that you do not have. You were looking for someone who would take you by the hand and hug you. Oh, Anna, how am I to prove to you that on the other side of all those loves which fill our lives, there is love? To love is to give life through death. To love is to let gush the spring of the water of life which fills our souls, burns and smolders and cannot burn out. Ah, the flame and the spring. You do not feel the spring, but are consumed by the flame. Is that not so?
I don't know. I only know that you're talking to my soul. Don't be afraid. It goes with my body. How can it be embraced or possessed without my body? Then I went on looking. A man was walking, dressed in a light coat. He was not wearing a hat. I did not notice his face at first because he walked lost in thought, his head lowered. On impulse, I began to walk in his direction. But when I lifted his face, I nearly gave a shout. It seemed to me I clearly saw Stefan's face, and I withdrew toward where Adam was standing. I grasped him firmly by the hand. Adam was saying,
I know why you've turned back. You could not stand the sight of his face.
I've seen the face I hate, and the face I ought to love. Why do you expose me to such a test? I am afraid!
You are afraid of love. Are you really afraid of love?
Well, why do you torment me? That man had Stefan's face. I am afraid of that face.
Lights have pause, words have pause, no pause for the thoughts or the drama.
People remain the same. Fate separates them, makes them change, forming no unity.
The pavement and roadway are wet from the falling rain. Let delusion and fiction be gone. No one has passed by. The light has not been taken away.
Everything remains as it was. The green is fed by rain. The trees have not yet rusted. Anna's wet hair and Stefan's arm and coat.
This has been.
Blop.
No one allows it to return
Blop.
to wet hair because of
Blop.
spring or autumn. Do not
Blop.
cry.
You are not different. Only the rain falls along.
And the stone does not drink water, doesn't drink.
The night is falling and he has brought light, has brought it and taken it away, and wanted to become you and me, him and her, but he has gone.
It is I! Stephen, taking Anna's hair and crying.
I roused myself from my visions and meditations, and I was standing in the same place. The jeweler's shop was shut as before. I recall his eyes, which, independently of his mouth, uttered this command.
You must not fall below the level of my sight. You must not fall lower, for the weight of your life must be shown on my scales.
That man had Stefan's face. Must he have that face from me? Why? Why?
The day Christopher told me about Monica, I walked home more slowly than ever before, as if deliberately looking for new streets and roundabout routes. After all, I had to ponder my son's words and seek a climate for them in my own heart. I had known of her before. She was one of Christopher's fellow students. I also knew that Christopher was interested in the girl. I saw her a few times. She was a shy and delicate child, made on me the impression of a being enclosed in herself, whose true value gravitates inward so much that it simply ceases to reach other people. Is that a true value? So I thought about Monica among unknown streets, but I kept seeing Christopher. Thinking about him had become something as close to me as my own existence. It had bored so many paths through my consciousness that wherever a thought began, it was bound to come across one of them. Just now I am, I suppose, in front of the jeweler's shop. And all of a sudden I can see something like a mirror where the fates of Andrew and myself were once reflected. We stood for a long time on the threshold. It was an October evening. The wedding rings were lying before us in the window. Then we saw them on the fingers of our hands. Our nearest future was there in that strange mirror. Well-wishers entered through the wall of that vision. We heard their conversations, even more their thoughts. And Andrew and I, with the help of 2 gold rings, became one. To that point only, we read in the mirror. The rest is unknown. Christopher was not yet born, though conceived in me. And Andrew's later fate, the history of our union, everything then unknown, was now made flesh. When Christopher was 2 years old, Andrew went to the front. He took the child and hugged him for a long time before the door closed behind him. That was the last vision, and Christopher does not know his father. Our union remained in that child, nothing more. Christopher grew up. Andrew did not die in me, did not die on any front. He does not even have to come back, for somehow he is. You have no notion, my husband, how terrible the fear is that borders on hope and penetrates it daily. There is no hope without fear, and no fear without hope. And Christopher grew, and more I saw you in him. So I did not leave the sphere of your most strange person, to whom I have given myself and from whom I do not know how to withdraw. You do not come, do not even take the trouble. On the far side of the mirror, the jeweler fitted the rings. On the far side of the mirror, our fate was split. But the union remained. Christopher. Christopher told me today about Monica, the shy, strange girl, just as you once said to your mother, Teresa. The word has been uttered. So I stood today, again in front of the jeweler's shop, reading the continuation of our strange story. That old man had in his eyes the new plane of our existence. Our hearts were the vertical and the plane met. When I saw them together, they were leaving, both joyful. Monica, in her smile, betrayed a discreet breakthrough. Christopher had read the person, and their thoughts suffused each other. They could have passed by, not noticed me even, and yet all their conversation had to be contained in me.
I am my mother's child, and I find her in you too. I don't remember my father, so I don't know what a man ought to be. I'm beginning my life anew. I lack ready models. Father remained in mother when he fell somewhere at the front, and didn't visit me anymore. Wasn't with me day by day. Mother implanted the idea of father in me. Thus I grew up, thinking more often than you can imagine about her woman's fate, about her loneliness full of the absent man, whom I embody with my presence. But I don't want this fate for you. I want the present, and the future, the suffusion we have now. Is there so much of my mother in you that I have to leave her in order to find her in you? This life is altogether new, and people are new. Thank you for this. Precisely for this, that you have compelled me, Monica, to grasp my existence as an untold completeness, enhanced and delineated because you have drawn near.
And yet I am afraid of myself, and also afraid for you. Before that, for a long time, I was afraid of you and for myself. Your father went away and died, and yet the union remained. You were its spokesman, the love passed to you. My parents live like two strangers. The union one dreams of does not exist, where one person wants to accept and to give life for two. Will it not be a mistake, my dear? Will it not come to an end? One day will you not leave as my father has? Did I not leave like mother? Is human love at all capable of enduring through man's whole existence? Well, what pervades me now is a feeling of love. But I am also pervaded by a feeling of the future, and that is fear.
Wait.
I know. You took it from me once. You took it once in your hands, like a second pair of hands, frozen, cold, in danger of never getting warm. These are my hands. Remember, Christopher, skiing at the edge of the forest with the sun setting fast and we had lost the way? I was also afraid of you, of that strength of yours which could master me and then leave me. That was a feeling for the future. Now I'm more afraid of myself, having gained confidence in you. You said that your father had gone, and yet he has remained, Christopher, not like my mother, not like my father. So I began to think that you two would remain, even if you went like your father. And everything has changed since then. I began to be afraid for you.
We have to accept the fact that love weaves itself into our fate. If fate does not split the love, people win their victory. But nothing else beside, and nothing above either. These are the limits of man. I sometimes wake at night, and at once my consciousness is with you. I ask myself, if I can take your freezing hands, warm them with my hands, a unity will emerge. A new vision of existence which will embrace us both. Will it not die later, though? I struggled for hours, unable to sleep till morning, tempted to escape somewhere, but I can't anymore. We must go together from now on, Monica. We must go together. Even if I were to leave you as early as my father left mother. all that we must leave behind and make our fate from scratch. Love is a constant challenge thrown to us by God. Thrown, I think, so that we should challenge fate.
We must go together from now on, Christopher. We must go together. Even though I might leave as my mother left father. I have long been afraid of love for this very reason. Today I am still afraid of love. That challenge to man. You are taking a difficult girl, Christopher, sensitive to a fault, who easily withdraws into herself and only with effort breaks the circle. You are taking a girl who absorbs more than you can give, perhaps, and herself gives most sparingly. Mother has more than once rebuked me for all this. And it's true. I see it now more clearly and sharply than she.
I cannot go beyond you. Why does one not love a person for his easy character? Why does one love at all? What do I love you for, Monica? Don't ask me to answer. I couldn't say. Love outdistances its object, or approaches it so closely that it's nearly lost from view. Man must then think differently, must leave cold deliberations. And in that hot thinking, one question is important. Is it creative? But even that he cannot tell, because he is so close to his object. And when the wave of emotion subsides, what remains will be important. All this is true, Monica. And do you know what gives me most joy? That there is so much truth in us that somehow we read ordinary things more easily from the heart of these exaltations.
That evening, I could not help realizing, Andrew, how heavily we all weigh upon their fates. Take Monica's heritage. The rift of that love is so deeply embedded in her that her own love stems from a rift too. Christopher tries to heal it. In him, your love for me has endured, but also your absence. The fear of love for someone absent. Yet this is no fault of ours. Here is the place where we once stood, just as they are standing today. I remember, Andrew, how we looked into the window of that shop, and you stood by me once so discreetly. First I saw your face in the window pane, and only then felt your presence. Andrew, nothing has passed. And I know that the old jeweler, who tonight is also older by these 27 years, gave you the same looks, as if you were sounding through your hearts and defining through those rings a new level of existence. Is the old jeweler's life changed into small pieces by being filled with the lives of people, the lives of so many people? Andrew took his ring and died with it. I wear mine still.
When we took the rings, I felt your hand tremble. We forgot to pay attention to the face of that old man, whom Mother had told me about. His eyes are said to be very expressive. It was not our fault we read nothing in his eyes. And he said little, things we knew anyway. So do not be surprised, Mother, that his words left no trace. Things we knew anyway. We did not sense greatness. And Monica's trembling hands told me much more. I was engrossed in her being moved. And in my own experience of her being moved, which I shared fully, I saw us too deep down in our experience. I think I love her very much.
We were taken up with each other. How could we tear ourselves away? He did nothing to fascinate us. He simply measured, first the circumference of our fingers, then of the rings, as an ordinary craftsman would. There's no artistry in it even. He didn't bring us closer to anything. All the beauty remained in our own feelings. He did not widen or narrow anything. I was absorbed by my love, and by nothing else, it seems.
This frightened me, however. Does the old jeweler not act anymore with the force of his eyes and his word? Or is it that those two are different, and unable to feel that force hidden in his look and his speech? Is it that they are different? What are you building, children? What cohesion are these feelings of yours going to have beyond the old jeweler's message, of which the vertical axis cuts across every marriage in this world?
I think about my parents. Since of course I try to imagine our wedding day. Christopher, I often rehearse it. It must be like rehearsals in a theater. The theater of my imagination and the theater of my thought. Father will play the part of father and the part of spouse. Mother will accept that part and adjust her own to it. I shall be tired of their faces. When are we going to begin to live our own lives at last? When at last will I believe that you are not like father? When will you be only Christopher to me, free from these associations? I want so much to be yours. And only one thing is constantly in my way. That I am myself.
It was strange, dearest mother. The story of my love for Monica, whom I've had to win over for herself, and also for her parents. They do not really like me. Though things may be a bit better now, and yet I try to imagine with her their participation in our wedding. After all, it is different from what you think, and will be different. People have their depths, not only the masks on their faces. Monica, what do you know about your mother's depths, and your father's, Stefan's? When the day of our wedding comes, you will emerge from between them. Once they led a little girl by the hands, and earlier still you were a baby, and your father came back from work and asked your mother, Anna, whether you had gained weight, Monica, or whether your appetite was good, and was happy at every ounce of your little body, was happy at your sleep, then at your chatter, and in the process, he became a child himself. All that cannot pass without leaving a trace. So, when the day of our wedding comes, I will come and take you away from them. A human being ripe for pain, for the pain of new love, and for the pain of a new birth. And we shall be all intensely joyful, and we shall all stand on the border of what in human language must be called happiness.
Christopher, my son, is good to Monica, as if he wanted to be to her the father he himself never knew, and the father she thought she had lost. A most strange process, Monica, when someone escapes from within us. Someone who exists, so he escapes simply because we are not holding on to him. An even stranger process when by intuition we create in ourselves someone who does not exist. It is how Christopher created you, Andrew, and still wants to create Stefan and Anna, Monica's parents, and her. When the day of the wedding came, both parents were there, and Monica stood between them in a white dress, and Christopher walked next to me, Adam taking the place of his father. Adam was the last person to see Andrew. They had served in the same company. When Adam returned from the front, he visited me at once and told me what Andrew had said. Maybe Adam even took into his heart something of Andrew's great loves, for Adam came to love Christopher dearly, and the boy had an affection for him. I often found them at home deep in passionate conversation. I was a bit uneasy, thinking that maybe Adam had me in mind and would eventually ask for my hand. But one day he said, I am here,
I suppose, to take up every man's future fate, because his previous fate also had its roots in me.
I did not understand these words at all, but I know that since then I have been totally at ease. We were now very festive. Monica looked lovely, and Christopher was somewhat pale. They were walking slowly toward each other. Then Christopher took her by the arm as they walked ahead. The jeweler's shop was on their right as they half turned back. The young people exchanged rings and left, holding each other by the hand. We stayed behind. I remember the window of that shop had become a strange mirror once, absorbing the future up to the point where mystery began. Mystery, the unknown, was enough. Love was stronger than fear. And today they went ahead. They did not even look at their reflection. Did not sound out the future. Will the mystery, the unknown, begin at once for them? As they walked ahead, Christopher clasped her by the arm. He wanted to remold the memories of her parents. They have remained here, and I with Adam. Was I to examine my Christopher's intuition?
Adam! I never thought I would meet you here. Perhaps even now this name sounds strange on my lips. Do you remember? Once you unexpectedly started a conversation with me right here. Do you think I have reconciled myself to this even now? A sense of disproportion did not vanish without a trace. I cannot bring both of these faces nearer. I cannot identify them. The old girlish love for that man dried up like water which cannot a second time spring from the earth. I tried, though, to believe in him, and in an order governing everything, including my own life. Besides, I ceased to despise him, ceased to bear a grudge, that terrible grudge at my life which he had wasted. I began to look for guilt in myself as well. It was there. I did not now cut conversations short, did not keep silent to crush him. Did he change? I do not know, but he became less burdensome. He too must have found it easier to bear my presence. We may have stopped moving away from each other at such a pace as before. Now, things seem to stand still. Do we live through each other? I suppose not. We live more through our children. Monica's the most difficult. It is in her that we destroyed most, and now she is leaving us. To my mind, too early, and taking with her a certainty of her parents' guilt. In this, I suppose, she does us wrong.
That evening I saw Anna again. The epiphany of the challenge of authentic love was still vivid to her. Anna had entered the road of gift-giving love. She had to give and take in a new way, in different proportions than before. The turning point occurred that night, many years ago. At that time, everything threatened self-destruction. A new love could begin only through an appreciation of what is higher, through an awareness that the feeble efforts of our love need the signs of enduring generosity. What Anna felt of it at first was only the suffering. Over the course of time, a gradual calm came, and something new that was growing, that was still intangible, but above all did not taste of love. One day they may learn to relish the taste of that something new. At any rate, Anna is closer to it than Stefan. The cause lies in the past. The error resides simply there. The thing is that love carries people away like an absolute, although it lacks absolute dimensions. But acting under an illusion, they do not try to connect that love with the love that has such a dimension. They do not even feel the need, blinded as they are, not so much by the force of their emotion as by lack of humility. They lack humility toward what love must be in its true essence. The more aware of it they are, the smaller the danger. Otherwise, the danger is great. Love will not stand the pressure of reality. How sorry I was for Anna that night many years ago. How sorry I was for Stefan. They already had 3 children who were beginning to grow up. Monica felt every bit as strongly. I was terribly sorry for them. Much more even than for Andrew when he was taking leave of me on the way to his outpost. He said then, "I shan't come back." It remained for me to take that news to the widow and orphan. I tried to take the place of father for Christopher, since I could not take Andrew's place in dying. Sometimes human existence seems too short in relation to love. At other times it is, however, the other way around. Sometimes love seems too short in relation to existence, or rather too trivial. At any rate, each person has at their disposal an existence and a love. The only problem is how to create a sensible structure from it. But the structure must never be inward-looking. It must be open in such a way that on the one hand it embraces other people, while on the other it always reflects the absolute existence and love. it must always in some way reflect them. That too is the ultimate sense of your lives. Teresa, Andrew, Anna, and yours, Monica, Christopher.
Adam mentioned us one by one, left his own name out. He was, as it were, a common denominator of us all. At the same time, a spokesman and a judge. Somehow we quietly entrusted ourselves to his thoughts, his analysis, and heart. All this was and moved or was moving slowly into another structure. It was hard to tear thought and heart away from the young ones. Monica and Christopher again in some way reflect the absolute existence and love. How? This is the question one cannot ask to its conclusion. The mirror where I saw the immediate future with Andrew wasn't even there. The jeweler has locked up his shop, and the two young people have both gone away. Do they know at least what they reflect? Should one not follow them? They have their own thoughts. They will come back here. They will certainly come back. They have simply gone to ponder for a while, to create something, to reflect the absolute existence, and love must be the most wonderful of all. But one lives in ignorance of it.